to Women Making Moves, where we celebrate the moves that women are making. My name is Amy Pons. I'm a Master Certified Life Coach and an energy healer. I'm joined today with Dr. Claire Murigande. Dr. Claire Murigande is a transformative conversation catalyst with the vision to amplify social impact through audio storytelling. She is a captivating speaker, an outstanding moderator, and a multi-award nominated podcast host. In her career within the life sciences industry, Dr. Murigande has been recognized as a thoughtful and effective leader. She is a passionate advocate for gender equality and inclusion. Dr. Claire Murigande holds a PhD in biology and an executive MBA in digital leadership. Claire, welcome.
Hi, Amy. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here with you today.
So happy to be with you as well. I can vouch that you're an exquisite moderator, and not just a moderator. Sometimes I feel like that's a little bit of a limiting word. You contributed so much to the conversation as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just that you orchestrated, which is a feat in and of itself, especially with a lot of strong voices, but also opined and contributed greatly to the International Day Against Harassment in the Workplace that we were on 2 months ago now.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks for the nice feedback.
Oh, you're welcome. How's your summer going?
It's fine. It's finally warm here in Switzerland, and yeah, enjoying some good weather. And I have to say, the thing I like about summer is the fact that the days are quite long. Somehow, you lose track of time early in the evening because it's still daylight, but I like that even the days start very early in the morning. So it feels like you can do lots of stuff throughout your day.
Is that everywhere in Europe or only the Switzerland region?
No, I think it's everywhere. And I think the more you go north, I have some friends in Sweden. I think they have very, very short nights, which that must be really confusing, I think, for the body.
Yeah, the reason I asked is that, like I said, I just got back from France, and it seemed like the sun rose very early. And interestingly, while I was there, a full moon peaked this past weekend. And so I held a beautiful full moon ceremony, but we were like waiting and waiting and waiting for the moon to rise. And we're like, where is she? It was kind of funny. Like we were still kind of outside waiting at 10:30 p.m., which I'm used to the US. She's far and, big and up in the sky by then. So anyway, what is your podcast?
My podcast, it's called Narratives of Purpose. And I started that almost 4 years ago. I mean, actually, the idea really started exactly 4 years ago, July 2020. I think I'm not the first person, and probably you'll hear more about other people who started podcasts during the pandemic. So I'm one of those people. But the thing is, I wanted to really give the voice to people that I was either following or I knew around me who were actually doing positive things. So basically kind of trying to weigh out the negative information, everything happening with COVID, because obviously, COVID was really dramatic and it was unprecedented and we had to adjust in so many ways. But that didn't, erase whatever else was happening around the world. And that's what I wanted to do, right? Create this platform and show that positive things continue to happen. And sometimes there's more positive than negative, actually. So that was the whole idea behind, was to create this platform as a way to amplify those who are actually making positive change. And I kind of stumbled upon social entrepreneurs and social enterprise throughout the process because I had no idea about that. I had this big vision, or I thought, maybe you can say that this was something utopic, where I thought you could actually do business and still do good and still make money, and had no idea it already existed, So I kind of stumbled upon social entrepreneurship, and that's where most of the people who are featured on the show are social entrepreneurs or founders of impact-driven organizations. And the thing about the podcast, it doesn't look at one specific area or industry. So there's a lot about health equity. Obviously, my background being a scientist and having worked in the life sciences industry for a long time, it's also personally something I am really drawn to. But also like education and how can you really create sustainable business. Some people even speak about regenerative business. So all these new ideas and just, putting it out there to perhaps give like a different perspective to people, and quite an open range of topics. Even though after 3 years, it was quite, various topics. But this year specifically, 2024, I'm focusing on women's health. because I thought, okay, maybe let me do something closer to me, right? Being, a woman myself, healthcare is my background. And I also have a personal story with a chronic condition. And I have been hearing more and more people, talking about their own experience navigating the healthcare system and everything. And it's also becoming a big topic, especially in the workplace and corporate. So I thought, okay, let me focus on that specifically this year, make a little less episodes, but be more targeted. And this is quite exciting.
Well, that's so exciting. I actually hadn't heard the term social entrepreneur, but I think what's exquisite about that, what resonates with me is that's how I find the women that I interview for this show is women who have determined the threshold for their lives of what not only they deserve, but also what they came here uniquely to do and champion in their unique brilliance. And I feel, especially as the divine feminine is rising, women are on the forefront of creating the change and the balance that we've never seen in this lifetime. And I think the most challenging part about that in the work that I do is that as more of us rise to what we do deserve and what we do want differently for our lives, those who wish to continue oppressing will tighten the screws, so to speak. And so I especially feel that as being very in tune with energetics of the universe, the world, of the collective. Over the next 6 months especially, that's going to get even louder. And so how exquisite for women like you and me to be able to hold our light for other women to step into theirs, because we need y'all. We need you. We're out here doing this. And you've seen what's been happening in the US over the past few weeks. My
Absolutely.
goodness. So fascinating. I am Team Kamala. I was actually on the way back from France and I was sitting in the Canadian airport. And up to that point, I was like, I'm going to move to Canada. I'm going. And then seriously, the moment I landed, I sat down to wait for my connection, all the news alerts started coming in. And my body just lit up. I felt like I was about to explode because for the first time in so long, I felt really proud to be an American. Like, wow, that might be happening, to step into this world where we know, when I talk about divine feminine, divine masculine, that is not gender, that is energetically what we're bringing forth. Men have the divine feminine as well. And we've, especially in the US, we've hit like a tipping point. And the thought of having not just a woman, but Kamala is pretty mind-blowing. So I'm excited. Anyway, so I'll pause there.
It's true. It's super exciting news. And to your point, I think that's what's quite fascinating with the US is like anything and everything can happen, literally.
I went to France because I'm like, I got to get out of this country. And then I thought how exquisite on the way back. I was like, oh, how amazing. And Joe did a great job. But I got to the point where this is the best we've got to put forth as president is these two older white men. Like, is that true? No, it's not true. So I'm just, again, Team Kamala. Awesome. I will shout that from every rooftop. So.
And I think you're right as well. And probably you know it better than me when you speak about energies. I've been reading a bit, to be honest, this summer. Somehow I got attracted to that with this new full moon that happened, what you were explaining about this weekend.
Yes.
And it feels like whether you're into it or not, you can feel that an energy is shifting, is changing, not only for like yourself personally as an individual, but also collectively. And coming back to what you're saying with, the US and saying, oh, we had these two older white men and now suddenly someone else is in the running. That in itself is already a change, whatever's going to happen later.
Yeah.
I think it's not only in the US, it's actually everywhere. And you can see that, especially you coming now back from France. There was also this, what was it, 3 weeks ago? When did they vote? I think 3 weeks or something.
Oh, yeah. Right? And a huge
Exactly. So you see, it feels like wherever you are in the world today, I think in India was also voting this year, particularly, like so many countries around the world are like electing their governments and so on. And even beyond that, you can tell with whatever movements, social movements happening, there's kind of this tipping point or shifting point. I don't know how you want to, explain it, but there is change happening, like the system that has been in place up until now. And that's what I also see when I am through my podcast. In the beginning, I was like, oh, this person is doing something interesting. All these people too. So each time I reached out to a certain topic or a certain area of expertise, suddenly like everything was opening up and say, oh, I didn't know about these people. What are they doing? I didn't know about this term. So it's just like everything's bringing like new possibilities, whatever that means. I don't know if we're really sure what that is, concretely speaking, or how that's going to look like. But there's this sense of things that have to change, literally have to change, because the system has just not been able to bring equal opportunities to everyone.
Yeah, it is beautifully shifting, and we are seeing it in really broad strokes. And from an energetic standpoint, if you high level, divine feminine energy, again, which all humans have, that's the trust, the flow, the creation. Divine masculine is belief and action and structure. So imagine being in either one of those energies only. So in the masculine, I'll share my perspective from US, especially in the workplace, which is how we got together. In the workplace, it's only been the masculine, which is not divine. It's actually turned toxic because there's only a care around the structure as it relates to power, hierarchy, money. There's an assumption that when we feel or we're human at all, it's like soft. And if we're only in the feminine, we beautifully keep creating, and then there's no outlet or structure for us to release it to the world. So beautiful balance is what we're being asked to call on. And to your point, I feel that we're seeing it both in larger world structures, but also on an individual level, where in my day-to-day work, and for me, it was workplace psychological abuse, which beautifully, by the way, happened for me so that I could embark on my social entrepreneur journey. So it's like a yes and for me. But also on an individual level, that's where a lot of clients come to me and they're like, listen, everything that was kind of okay for me or just fine is now intolerable. And they're like, what happened? Those of us who have realized what's happening are now being asked to guide the others.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's a lot of energy chit chat. So besides your podcast, and we'll make sure to put that in the notes so that we can all give a listen, what moves are you excited to be making right now?
I have a new role now since a couple of months. So I'm the president of an association, which is based here in Switzerland. It's called the PROWAH. So PROWAH is the acronym for Professional Women of African Heritage. Mm-hmm. And that's an exciting move for me personally, because, well, first of all, I never thought I'd be in such a position, which is always super exciting. I was a member for a while, and I know two of the co-founders. There's three amazing ladies who kind of got together at some point. I think it was five years ago, and they were just surprised to see or even to realize that each of them existed. In the sense that the way I described PROWAH, I was at an event a few months ago, and, I just described, just before walking on stage and talking on that panel, someone asked me like, oh yeah, where are you from? And I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, yeah, where are you from? Because that's the question everybody always asks, right? It's kind of like, sometimes I don't even think about it. And I was like, well, do you mean where I was born? Like what my citizenship is, or where my roots and my heritage are? Because all those are three different things, and when I was explaining that, that I was born in a country which was not the one where my parents were born, which is neighboring country anyway, so quite close culturally speaking, and that I spent my childhood in a different country but still the same region in that continent in Africa, and then my family moved to Switzerland, and since then I've been living in this country. And maybe your listeners know, that although it's a very small country, I think the population is barely 9 million or something, we have 4 different national languages. So they have different linguistic regions, and I've lived in 2 of them. So for me, it's like I've been exposed, even though that's just 2 continents and just a few countries. I know people who've done way more than that. And for me, that's what PROWAH is, in the sense that the whole idea and the whole purpose and vision is to bring this collective wisdom, collective experiences of all these different peoples who have a similar path as mine, whether they've lived in, I don't know how many countries or continents. And we have members from over 20 nationalities. So mind you, maybe some have 2 or 3 nationalities, I don't know, and like 30 professions. And just saying, okay, we are here in Switzerland. We know that they're African women and really the entire continent. And this is a force to reckon with in the sense, positive force, right? In the sense that, we need to kind of leverage all these experiences, have this place where, first of all, we can get together and exchange our own experiences, like as a safe place, but also maybe even showcase our members. What are they doing? How are they contributing socially, right? Whether it's as entrepreneurs or part of a corporate or whatever is the individual initiatives that we want to show. And this is really fantastic because sometimes I would say like it's that kind of platform or that kind of like sisterhood I didn't know that I needed. Not that I needed to be supported, but actually I can contribute actively and bring something on top. And for me, this was kind of a realization being part of this group because I was never part of association or whatever until quite recently, where I joined a couple of other groups where I realized actually I don't have to be there because I need something. But if I go there, I can bring a lot. And just switching that perspective for me changed everything. And I think now in this new role, I have a fantastic team of 5 other amazing ladies. And, we have like lots of ideas and things we want to put in place. But just that in itself to say that we are taking over as a team from a previous team and who also took over from the founding team, it's kind of like seeing this legacy grow and become something else, and everybody bringing in their own, perspective and experience. And I'm super excited for that.
That's a really beautiful organization. What is an average conversation or a meeting or get together look and feel like?
Oh, we have different get-togethers. So the one that's pretty popular is called the Sisterhood Hangouts. Basically, we just find a place, whether it's a cafe, a bar, and then, whoever can show up, shows up. We would have, I think I've been to a couple of those, maybe 10 people, perhaps a dozen. And it's, imagine like networking event, but you're just like, oh, who are you? What are you doing? And so far, so we have our majority of members are based in Zurich. We also have members in Basel. And I think one of my goals as well is to expand in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, which is where I grew up, by the way. So we would just meet every other month, for example, and then build the community from there, right? Creating those connections, that networking. And we also have something we will also, I think, reconduct this year. We had this series of webinars that were called Health Talk, where we bring up like a health issue that is probably specific only to, African women or perhaps women of color. And that ties back into what I was telling you before with my podcast, what I'm focusing on this year, women's health. I mean, this even without considering the different intersectionalities. If you just take women as a group, half of the population of the world, by the way, slightly more, that in itself is not a niche. It's probably the largest market you ever found, but it's the least studied population. So, once you get that, and then now because we're women of African heritage, then we kind of go a bit deeper into that and take all the different intersectionalities and see, okay, what are topics that are interesting here? I mean, even for me, who has a scientific background, I've been to a couple of these webinars, and these are things I didn't know. I didn't learn, right? I didn't know the research was being done. And exactly the experience I had when I was speaking to the first series. So I'm going to do part 2 now of the podcast. But the first series, I spoke to 5 entrepreneurs who were part of a panel at a congress a few months ago. And it just so happens, and now I don't want to make it general because I don't have like the whole complete overview, but from my experience so far, it just so happens that those who are making change is because they went through some sort of experience and they realize the system is not supporting me, right? If I want to narrow it down in a few words. And this is exactly what also on some of those webinars I was by PROWAH is like, okay, this family may put together this association because their child was affected with this and this. They couldn't find help. And this is where it is now, right? So it's really like grassroots movement.
This topic is really hot. A lot of women that come on to the show talk about women's health in general because we know that in clinical trials, women weren't added until 1993. So I love what you're doing with women's health specifically. My mind goes to our menstrual cycles, menopause, and the entire life cycle of having a uterus. And then also layering into, to your point, the intersectionalities of how it impacts every type of woman differently, or like based on our lived experience for like environmental things, our DNA. And there's still so much we don't know. One of the things I'm most proud of is that today we're not, I'll speak for myself and many women that I commune with, is that we're not accepting the trope of, well, every woman has experienced it, so what's the big deal mentality. We're like, no, this is a big deal. There's those machines you can plug people up to that don't experience menstrual cycles, and they can feel what a menstrual cramp feels like, and it's equivalent to a heart attack.
It is. It is. I read that actually it's equivalent to a heart attack. So imagine having that. I mean, that heart attack happens once. I mean, it's like one event, right? But then that pain, you endure it for several days.
Days and constant.
And you go to work, you go to school, all these things.
Yes. And so I don't accept that anymore, that like, well, what are you so upset about? Women have always had these. Yeah, they've been through hell. And now that we know better, we're going to do better. It's us giving other women the opportunity by shining our light and saying, it's not okay that you're in so much pain. And it's okay that you say that out loud. And let me know what you need or how I can help support. It's just making sure women feel safe to do that. Now, the other side of that is, and I'd love your thoughts on, is when women do go and don't get believed.
It adds on to that, you're already going through something, right? And then people don't believe you, or you have to accept it. So that's another emotional and mental load on top of what you're going through.
Exactly.
And some way you need to find a way to navigate that, right? So honestly, I mean, women they're superheroes.
Superheroes, like legit. We're magic. That's what I always say. Like, we hold all life force and vitality in our womb space. So as a biologist, what were your thoughts over COVID? Were you doing active research then, or what were you up to during that time?
That's a good question. I didn't do active research. I mean, there was so much information that actually you had to first screen all the information. And the information was changing so rapidly. One thing that actually didn't strike me, because I mean, I always say that whenever there's a will, there's a way. But the fact that they developed a vaccine very quickly, in the sense that they put money for it, right? Because it's all about money. Let's not kid ourselves. That was impressive. And then obviously, I mean, competitions take over, and that comes to your point, what you were saying before about the corporate structure, that it was more on the masculine, that is structure and following things. It was more about producing, delivering, right? And not thinking beyond that, which I understand because there's an emergency. The thing is, at some point I was wondering, okay, yes, we have this, but then what? Taking a step back and looking at it from like a bird's eye view and see, okay, now we have this, but then what? Because in the end, it will only be, as much as it has helped, obviously, but there has also some controversy on side effects and many things. And I personally also had some side effects. But the thing is, how was that different from doing things the way we were already doing it? For me, I don't have an answer to that. It's just like an observation and probably a process everybody or every structure organization had to go through anyway. It's like this was kind of an opportunity or a time to say, okay, let's stop. Literally everything stopped. And can we rethink and then not only just stop at thinking, but also do things differently?
Yeah. And over COVID, to your point, like everything shut down. So we got a glimpse into us having a little bit more autonomy. It was like you almost were forced to sit within yourself. Like we got this beautiful opportunity and invitation to sit and say, do I want my life to be running the way it was before pandemic? And so I think what's unfortunate is that post-pandemic, and I say post loosely because as you, I'm sure, know, there's a resurgence right now. But what I saw happening is after the pandemic, primarily in the US, women once again took the biggest burden when things started to open back up and there were mandates on, and this is my personal opinion, because the people in charge before pandemic were so set in that masculine of like power, control, structure, they were anxious to get back to that. So like all that we had said over pandemic, and that was when I was still in corporate, where it was like, come as you are, we're flexible, we need you, we care about you. It was almost like, wait, was that true? So what really grabbed me about what you said is that we had an opportunity to do things differently. And that was one of my invitations. I was like, actually, no, I don't want to go back to the way things were. And it got even pinchier. So I said, okay, I'm going to go out on the front lines of this, like human to human, not just be part of the continuing perpetuation of, again, in the US, systems in the workplace that were created 100 years ago that are rooted in patriarchy, white supremacy, colonialism, late stage capitalism.
Sometimes it's good to also have like parallels and make things like compare with easy things just to put things into perspective. So, but as you were saying, these are structures that have been in place for such a long time, even though, on a human scale, it's probably not a long time. Again, it bears a question, how open are you or are we as societies ready to re-examine and really put in the work, because it will require work. Like anything, it also requires time. So we were so used to have everything here and now and quickly. You order online, you have it tomorrow at your doorstep. Well, maybe that is not made for the long term. So how can we do it differently? And again, coming back as well to medicine and to everything, it's like, obviously, I would say probably because this is also like my background and how I was taught and learned research. But now you hear even more and more about functional medicine, about so many things, which actually were there even before modern Western medicine. But now it's somehow either more accepted, or at least because you see the limits of the other type of medicine that we have put on top of the rest, right?
Yeah.
And that the way you eat is also important. What does that mean? How do you grow your food? So it's so much more holistic. That's why I'm saying that, we're so used to have things here immediately now that sometimes you just need time, right? Breathe. If you go to train for a marathon, you don't do it in 1 week. So everything has a process. That's the question we need to ask, is like, how open are we to re-examine everything, and how much time are we ready to put in? Not necessarily sacrifice, because in the end, it's going to benefit us, to really let the process go and really change things, right?
I love that you're getting philosophical, because I think this is still an opportunity for us to say, do we want to run this fast? Do we want to sacrifice ourselves and our well-being? It's interesting that you say about, it's relatively recent, about how we've been operating like in the workplace. But then I also think about when I was in France, I was at the castle, and castles were built because people would come and try to take your house or your land. I feel like the power over other individuals has been like the forefront. And that's again where I'm asking, I have felt personally, and I'm seeing it everywhere, and we're seeing it worldwide, the divine feminine of the flow and the balance. We're asking for a different perspective or a balance so that humanity can have a little bit more leeway toward the production of things, the doing. I always say, like, in a very simple way, we're so focused on the doing, but how do we want to feel when we do the thing? And oftentimes it's like, I don't want to feel right. Why not? And that comes into a whole other conversation. So what is a passion in your belly that you're feeling right now that you would speak on if given a platform to talk about anything?
It would be to encourage people to take the time to, how far they've come, and what is it that they can do next that is not only beneficial for themselves, but for whatever community they're part of, or even if it's in your workplace. Because sometimes, I remember that when I was also still in corporate, that it's true that I probably didn't have this competitive mindset, in the sense that, obviously you have a budget, you need to have a certain number of activities and everything, and you have your KPIs, etc., etc. But the thing is, if your people are not well enough, maybe they won't reach those numbers, right? So I think focusing on the people, even though it might sound like, oh, this is a soft whatever, as long as people are fine, it's like, how I was always asking myself, how am I doing in this role with the people around me, whether it's on my team or obviously I know like I can deliver. And I know that if I'm missing something, I know who to go to. I always say that this one thing I learned in my PhD. I mean, beyond the content, it could have been anything, it could have been physics or whatever. It was cell biology. It was like, how do I find the information and bring things together? And I guess this is also what I'm trying to do now, like with my own business, is how do I bring all these things together and make these conversations happen and raise this awareness? So the thing is, and sometimes when you say take the time, it doesn't mean take 3 years. It can be take 3 minutes. It can be, okay, the day you don't feel good, don't force yourself to go and work. That's when I say and take the time. It's like, okay, listen and see what does that mean. If maybe it doesn't mean anything at that point, but at least you took the time to give your body some space. And then you're ready to go with a bit more energy. I guess it's maybe my way of approaching energy, as you were saying that you're also a healer and work with energy. I think everybody, to be honest, I'm totally convinced that every single person on this earth feels when something is not right for them. The question is, what do you do about it? I don't mean to say you will have an answer and you can solve it, but sometimes you don't have to solve it. You just need to accept it and it's there. And then you find a new way of seeing things. And then, with time, whatever time that is, then things are gonna, evolve. So I would say really like, take the time and see how you can recalibrate or at least change your perspective somehow. And how can you contribute to not only your well-being, but also those around you? It might sound like a daunting task, but you realize that sometimes you don't need that much. Being present for people when they need to talk or just that's enough. And you can't solve everything in one day. One day is going to be this, the other day is going to be something else, and so on. So it's part of the process, I would say.
Claire, you nailed it, because I always share with folks, everyone has unique capabilities and gifts. And to your point, every single person, their bodies actually already know. And because, to your point, we don't often take the time, and this is where people get like, oh, that's woo-woo, this and that. Fine, whatever you want to call it. But when you do get still, and it does feel daunting, but all you need to do is take an intentional deep breath in, an intentional deep breath out, and suddenly you have like a clarity that you're like, whoa, it feels trippy, because it's not something that of our 5 senses of the physical body that we're not going to hear something or say, we might, but just getting still is all it takes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Stillness. And like I said, it doesn't have to be for 3 full days we don't speak to anyone. No, just take a minute.
No, just take a minute. I recently posted something and I was like, listen, harsh truth. You do have the time. You're just giving it to someone else.
Absolutely.
So people wrote back, they're like, ouch, I feel attacked. But it's like, thanks for saying that out loud. So what would you say, Claire? And this can be from your biologist perspective, a understanding the women of the world, PROWAH perspective, moderator speaker perspective, whatever you'd like to weigh in on this. What do you say to people that both understand what you do to encourage them to keep going on their unique path, whatever that is? But also, what do you say to those who maybe don't get it? And do you spend energy even like trying to explain it?
That would have been the question, actually. Where do I put my energy?
Like, where do you put your energy? Yeah.
Because it's obvious I can't put it for both at the same time. That's just literally not possible. And it's a matter of choosing. And I would rather go for those who understand and encourage them. And the reason I say that is that, surprisingly, really, I thought like the past, year or something, people reach out and say, oh, this is amazing. I'm impressed with what you're doing. It's like, what do you mean you're impressed? I'm just doing what I think feels right, or I'm trying, at least I'm trying. And it's like, yeah, but you had the courage to do this. And sometimes that's why what I tell people is that maybe like your own perception of yourself is not the same as the one everybody else has of you. And I guess I was experiencing that at that point, right? Where I'm like, yeah, but I'm just doing me, yeah, but you is not just nothing. And that's how I see actually other people as well. It's like, no, you can do this and you have this. And so I would say to those who understand or who maybe want to take the same path, I don't know, they need more encouragement, is just try it. I always say put yourself out there, because if there's one thing, it's like I think a lot of things started with the podcast, but even before that, if I look at my career and the way I've always made my decisions, it was more about, okay, this doesn't work. I need to find a different way, or I need to feel more comfortable here. So I tried at least a majority of the time to follow what I was feeling. Okay. Which sounds a bit counterintuitive for a scientist, but hey, that's how it is. I mean,
It's mildly entertaining to me that
mhm.
we have to have like a scientific or mathematical formula to understand what's happening on the soul plane.
And I think that's because coming back to what I was saying before, like the science, the way we know it today, at least the way when we talk about science, it's, I could compare that to say this is a language or a code that we invented to explain things. But then we didn't have those codes or those words to explain those things we couldn't yet explain. That's why I say, like, everybody says that gut feeling. We know that. That's what, coming back to what I was saying before. Everybody has this feeling and knows it. But then the science, as we know it, and as we refer to it today, didn't have the words or the right, codes to explain it to all of us. But we already knew it somehow. So that's why I'm like, if those who understand or see me, is like, you just put yourself out there, because the thing that happens when you, coming back to what you're saying, you just dive into or leverage like your uniqueness. Again, I don't like comparing people to others. It's like, maybe I can find, oh, Amy is doing a fantastic thing. It would be good if I had as much followers as her podcast. But it doesn't matter, because the way Amy is talking about what she's talking about is the way she's doing it. And the way I'm talking about what I'm talking about on my podcast is the way I'm doing it, even if maybe it's similar. So I can think, hey, how can I work with Amy instead of competing with her? That's what I was saying before. Like, my mind is more into the collaboration and the competition. Yeah. But that's just me. And as long as I accept it and I say, okay, how can I work? How can I use it to my advantage to reach what I want to do? That's the mindset you basically need, right? Because otherwise I will always be unsatisfied, I will be unhappy, or whatever you want to call it, because I'm comparing and I'm competing. And obviously there's always going to be someone that's better than me, even if I maybe, go faster than someone else. Well, someone else is going to be faster than me, or has more numbers or more awards or whatever it is, So just putting yourself out there, you also attract the people that will kind of support you through whatever is it that you're doing. So that's the only, thing I would say to people is just try. And failure shouldn't even be part of your vocabulary, because it should be learning, and learning means there's a process to it. And as long as you're moving, it means that you're not doing anything wrong,
No one can do what you do how you do it. So if you truly trust and know that about yourself, you don't have any competition ever. And trust that, I'll get a lot of people saying like, well, nobody liked my post. I was like, cool. But what if one person saw it and you changed their life that day? Trusting in that and not getting bogged down by, again, the power, structure, order, results, action of only in the masculine, not getting bogged down in that energy will really lift you up as an entrepreneur, especially as having your own business, knowing and trusting in yourself that you are reaching energetically, you're putting your voice out there, and the universe has something to match those that can hear you to you.
Exactly.
That lights me up. Thank you for that. Claire, where can we find you?
So on social media, I'm actually more active on LinkedIn, although I'm taking a summer break right now. But you can just type my first name and my last name. So that's Claire Murigande on LinkedIn, and you find me there. And apart from that, I think the podcast website is the place to go if you want to see anything that I'm doing around the podcast. And I know it's a mouthful. So this is the part where when I started doing all this thing, I didn't think on a lot of things. So the podcast homepage is narratives-of-purpose.podcastpage.io.
Perfect.
Or you just type Narratives of Purpose podcast in whichever search engine you use, and you'll find me there.
Or bookmark this episode where you can see in the show notes and get directly into Claire's podcast.
Exactly.
Claire, closing remarks as we wrap up.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for this conversation. And I hope that, I will have contributed to your podcast series and brought value for your audience as well. And everybody's welcome to connect with me if you have new ideas. If you want to be on the show as well, check out the guests that I've been inviting and let me know.
Thanks, Claire.
Thank you.